Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today with us. And I would like to thank IMED for bringing us together for this panel discussion, which I think is going to be very timely and very interesting. We are the Foreign Press Association, and with this panel, we would like to present our work, what we're doing here in the country, and what we're doing generally in the country that we're working in. You know that during the last years, our work has been sometimes, we have been called the absolute experts on several issues, and some other times our role has been demonized. So we're going to analyze today what our role is, what stories we're interested in, what our difference with local reporters is, and how the state is treating us, how the public is treating us, and many other issues. So with me today, I have a panel of distinguished guests and very good friends and colleagues. Hari Papachristou from Trade Wings, Lisa Guliamaki, who is correspondent, photojournalist for FPA, and Phoebe Fronista, who is videographer and correspondent. So let's get started. I would ask some questions, and then I will open the panel for questions from the audience, if you want to. First of all, I would like to ask, starting with Hari. He's the only gentleman within us, so we'll start with Hari. Can you tell us a bit what the role, what the job of foreign correspondents is? What is the difference in their work compared to local reporters? What are the steps one is following when you're picking a story?
Okay. You know, whenever indecent, not indecent, indiscreet people, usually taxi drivers, ask me what my job is, and I can't be bothered, I don't want a long conversation, I'm just saying I'm a translator. And sometimes I feel that this is also describing my job in a way, not in the sense of doing a one-on-one translation of somebody's quote into some other language that isn't it. But you're always stuck in the middle, translating different news values, because something that happens in this country might be news in country A, it might not be news in country B. You have different audiences, and you have to tailor this differently according to the audience that you're serving. And this is a hit and miss thing. Sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you get it wrong, sometimes you don't get it right. Sometimes if you don't get it right, or if you write stuff that inconveniences other people or hear and they disagree with that, you kind of have a backlash that isn't so nice, but it's part of the job and you have to do that. As your other question, as what the relation is or what the difference is with local correspondents, with local journalists, I wouldn't start so much with the differences. I would rather like to point out what the commonalities are. And everything starts with the fact that we as foreign correspondents, to a large extent, we rely or we depend on local correspondents doing the first work. Because we're here, we're jack of all trades. We are covering, sometimes you have one person covering the entire country, and you can't be an expert, or you can't cover everything as deeply and as sufficiently as would be required. So you rely on local journalists doing a first take from your point of view to dig up the information, and then you try to take it further and translate it into a different mode. Now, about the differences, I think it will transpire, and we'll have the opportunity to talk about that further down.
Thank you. So both Lisa and Phoebe, Lisa is taking photos, Phoebe is doing video a lot, so they're out in the street more than the average correspondent. We're all out in the streets, but they're even more out there. So is there any difference, Lisa? Are you treated in a different way? Or do you have more, advantages or more difficulties than a local reporter? How is it?
I wouldn't say primarily that there is a difference. It mainly has to do with experience in the field, and especially that I work in this country that I am living. Thus, I don't really have nobody's treating me in different way. It's more, I think, the matter of experience. And then sometimes it's the media that you represent. I mean, the country that the media belong to. There is no difference if there is a violence on the street. There might be a difference for a foreign correspondent coming from another country. Thus, if he doesn't speak the language, or he doesn't know the habits of the country, or he doesn't know how police, for example, is performing on the streets. So that's primary.
Phoebe?
Yeah, I would say the same, that, you know, especially to police, we're all the same. You know, if they're going to decide to push us back or to disperse us, they're not going to, you know, be like, oh, this is the French agency, so let's be nice. No, so it's the same. And as Harry said, like, without the local correspondents who are at Parliament every single day, no matter whether it's, you know, there's news or not, or outside the Prime Minister's office every single day, and the police know them, and they know everything. Like the local, like if you don't have good relationships with the local correspondents of the country that you're in, you're definitely gonna miss out both on the news. You're gonna be late to it, and also you're not gonna know, you know, how to be on the streets, because it's true, like there's many times, especially when we had really big stories, that foreign correspondents from other countries would parachute into the country, and they don't know anything, and they don't know where they're supposed to stand, and sometimes they get beat up quite badly because they don't understand the police, you know, what they're yelling at. So, you know, we've often had to like save them or pull them back and say, no, we can't, you know, no, or we leave, or, you know, the bathroom's there. You know, it's being on the street is amazing because there's so much solidarity. Like I feel like I'm a battle buddy with Luisa, for sure.
Luisa, you have been working, especially in the last months, during the last months, a lot in other countries other than Greece. Is it any different being a foreign correspondent in other countries, in Greece? Is it easier? Is it harder?
It depends. I believe that every correspondent should travel abroad exactly to see the differences and to open its mind, his or her mind. I was recently covering the funeral of the Queen in Edinburgh and London. I mean, all the colleagues were great to all of us, but I wouldn't, I mean, I was carrying what I was told to. I wasn't really searching for a lot of other images that I would do in Greece, for example, because I was just part of the team, and I had to help in what they needed from us. The big impact for me, it was actually the police behavior, because they were so nice, very strangely for me.
And yeah, yep.
I mean, about the differences of working in one country being totally different than working another. There was a photographer, I mean, we're talking about 15, 16 years ago. I'm sure you remember him. I'm not going to say the name. He was working in a Middle Eastern country, and he was appointed to Greece. I mean, he earned his work. He did a lot of work in the occupied territories in Israel. And then we sent him to cover a demonstration here. And the first thing he did was to try and go among the protesters. And he didn't know. And protesters can be really violent as well. I mean, it's not just the police. I mean, if my life was in danger, it was from protester side, not from the police side. I have to say that. So we tried to pull him back, and he said, why is this happening? I mean, in my other country, I used to go inside the protesters to be protected from the police. So there are these big differences between working in one country and another.
That's exactly the thing, that you have to know the habits. That's why for every foreign correspondent it's good to speak with the locals and to understand how either protesters, either police or anybody who anyways in charge of putting the order is behaving. And that's, I think, the first thing that somebody should learn. And that's as well the role of the Foreign Association, because you can advise some people if they ask for advices. Some do.
If they ask, yeah.
If they ask, some do.
And one thing that has changed in recent years, especially after the crisis, is basically the fact that many more correspondents are working as freelancers rather than on a contract basis. And this has its challenges. I'm sure you, Phoebe, would you like to share experiences?
Well, yeah, because when I started working in Athens, we would chase anybody, even the smallest minister, any member of parliament that would talk to us. It was exciting. It was a story. Everybody wanted stuff from Greece. They wanted starving children and fainting children, remember? And suddenly, like, the prime minister comes out, nobody cares. Now we're like trying to say, but this is happening and that's happening. And, all the foreign bureaus, they don't care anymore, because Greece, basically since, I'd say 2018, after that, the story just started dying down. So a lot of people left, a lot of people that didn't have, reason to live in Athens, they left. They went, to new adventures. I had about 3-4 different jobs. I would continue working. I worked for Reuters a lot. We made a podcast. I wrote for academic stuff, like anything, because, it's really hard. And if you're trying to get, an editor to get interested in a story, by that time, it's a month later, what are you going to do? So it's really hard being a freelancer. You always have to find new angles. Now I think the things that people care most about from us, from Greece, climate change. That's stories that are based around climate change. So you have to keep thinking, like, it's not what is really hot and exciting here in this country. You have to think, somebody in New Jersey, why would they want to, read about something happening in Athens? Or somebody in, I don't know, Shanghai, like, why would they care about Greek news? So you have to keep thinking, what is happening? What is this story? Why would anybody care outside? And so you have to keep all the time, like, changing, evolving, and finding new things to do. Otherwise, you can't really get by.
Yeah, you mentioned fainting children and starving children, and I think that's basically one of the reasons why the role of foreign correspondents in the country is important, because I remember back then, all the correspondents that were coming from abroad for a day or two were actually looking for what they had in mind. So this is why I think it's important for a country to have people on the ground.
Yeah, because they asked, that thing with the starving children, everybody was trying and getting all the fixers that were working here in Greece, and fixers are local journalists who basically report the whole entire story for the foreigner coming in and, package it nicely for them. And they were like, we're not coming, we're not sending a crew unless we find those fainting children. And you're like, it's not that we're not, not investigating enough, it's because that's, that story was an exaggeration. So there's lots of preconceptions that you have to fight back and say, no, this is what's actually happening on the ground.
Harry?
Maybe some related point. For some strange reason, Greece always punches above its weight journalistically. I've been here for 20 years, and always something is going on.
First, you have great talent.
It was the Olympic Games first, then came the debt crisis. Of course, things have started falling down after the debt crisis, but we had the refugee crisis. And this is also a source, I'll say it cynically, a source of employment for us. Also, the Greek debt crisis, in my view, you correct me if I'm wrong, it was a good opportunity for other people, Greeks working as foreign correspondents in Brussels. I mean, it was good for them. It's like, Luisa, when you had the Yugoslav war, I imagine that one of the reasons why there are so many people from the former Yugoslavia working in news agencies as cameramen, as photographers, it is because they were at the right place at the right time, covering a war where the media was. And right now you have Greeks in elevated positions, in bureau chiefs in Brussels, and you can't explain that without the Greek debt crisis. So the Greek debt crisis was good for us, and we were like government bonds. The worse people, the worse things are going, the better for us journalists. So,
And with this note, I would like to ask how the state is treating us. Has there been any difference during the years? What do you think? Who wants
Am I
to
getting
start?
the difficult question?
You go first.
It's not just the Greek government, it's the Greek society in general. I think that because they distrust their own media for many reasons, which maybe it's not topical for us to explain now, they kind of create an imaginary vision of what the foreign media are. First and foremost, they seek validation from the foreign media. They seek validation in every single story that we do. So whenever they read something which, as I said again, they either do not agree with, or that either inconveniences them, or if they read something that is plainly wrong or out of context, and we do mistakes from time to time, then they are doubly disappointed, and they even feel cheated in a way. For example, I'm always amused at how important it is for Greek media to report what foreign media say about them. And I'm not the only one who is amused. You get news items, I mean, half the news bulletins in Greek media is what does AP say about us, what does Reuters say about us. And they say the same things which they reported half an hour ago, which really doesn't make sense. So they really seek validation, and they have an very idealized idea for us. So when they're disappointed, they kind of, the backlash tends to be
usually they seek
bad.
validation when the story in foreign media matches their own story.
Of course, then it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Then it's brilliant.
Yeah. Phoebe?
Well, I would say that in the, let's say, decade that I've been doing this, I would say in the beginning, people were more impressed when you were like, the Associated Press wants to talk to us. This must be an important protest. But in the last few years, I would say they're not as impressed, and they also think that I would say that in the distrust in media that has increased, it's increased with us as well. So in the past, they would be like, oh, okay, Reuters is here, so we'll talk to them. And now they're like, oh, whatever, you're just going to edit this. And I would go, and I would be like, yes, of course I am, because this has to be 2-minute stories. And, and especially, I would say with COVID, I would say that it hasn't been since supporters of Golden Dawn that refused to talk to the press, and they hated us and they distrusted us. The way that after COVID, the protesters and the anti-vax protests, they really didn't want to talk to us. They didn't want to give us even the slightest, tiniest soundbite for any reason, because they're like, no, you're media, you're editing us, I don't care where you're from. No, so there is more hostility.
But you have that in other countries as
on
well.
the streets.
I mean, you have the...
For sure, yeah, for sure. I mean, back when I was studying in the States, they loved the press, and now they don't. But I would, with respect, like to ask our president about her experience, because I think there was a rather intense pushback from the government when you wrote something that they didn't like.
Okay, yeah, I thought we wouldn't go there, but anyways. Well, yeah, I mean, you all know the story, and it was quite surprising, and it came as a shock to me as well, because, all these previous years that I have been reporting under the previous government, my stories were very well received by the same people. So it's what I said before, when your story matches the rhetoric, you're the perfect expert. When the story doesn't match, you're demonized, basically. But I think that what is different is the fact that when our story is correct, at least that's my experience, you have the full support of your editors, which is great. You might go through a very tense fact-check period, but when they find out that you're good to go, then you have the absolute support. You have the absolute support when the story is published, because that's, the media organizations has chosen to publish the story anyway, so it's their responsibility and your responsibility as well. But yeah, it's a difficult period for foreign correspondents especially, I would say.
There is one particular looping mechanism that we haven't noticed, that we haven't mentioned, is that Exactly, because foreign media is used as a point of validation. And because the quality of public debate in Greece doesn't fulfill that function, so we have to fulfill that function. It's often, news stories are often used as a reference point by opposition parties, no matter what the opposition party is, no matter what the government party is. I'm seeing that mechanism for 20 years. It is the same thing. So you write something that is inconvenient to the government, then the opposition takes it and run with it. So the ruling party, in order to attack the opposition, it has to attack you. So this is the mechanism that works, and sometimes, I mean, in Greece you say you hit the saddle because you don't want to hit the donkey. It's that mechanism that happens. And I mean, it's the same in my experience. I mean, I know other people might disagree. It has been the same thing with every government. I mean, 6, 7 years ago, you couldn't write something about Greek debt that wouldn't annoy the government of the time. And then we were the good guys to the opposition who are in government now. I mean, it's the same thing all over, more or less.
It's true, but I mean, it has gone quite nasty in recent months. I mean, obviously, there's Twitter, the Twitter sphere, which we shouldn't pay much attention, but it's there, and it's, you know, it's unfortunate when you see government officials or state officials picking up arguments from the Twitter sphere, I would say. Luisa, what's your experience? How the state and the public is treating us?
First of all, social media, I would add that that's what you just said. I mean, whatever we publish, either it's photo, it's a text, then it's, you know, published there, and people are writing whatever they want, and it's not, of course, nothing can be controlled there. And then somebody takes it like the truth, which is obviously not. Then social media as well, I mean, it happened, for example, I was covering a demonstration of people protesting the police violence, for example, in Smyrni, which a policeman was hit badly by protesters. And when I tried to make I shot something, then I tried to make some other photos or video for a colleague, for our agency. Police attacked me in the way that it's all your fault. I mean, media fault, photographers or photojournalists or video VJ fault. Because it's all published on social media, and then it's our fault. But how it's our fault? I mean, it's not our fault. So this doesn't help, and as well the mistrust in media by people, it as well doesn't help, because many people would turn away or either in good, either in bad way, tell you not to take any pictures or not to take any videos. Sometimes when you explain that I work for the specific agency, then it can help. But not always, of course. So, yeah, I mean, it is different. It was.
What about the perceptions that our editors have? I mean, is there any difference? What photos are, Luisa, what photos are your editors looking out from Greece? I mean, are we back to the time that we were looking for photos from islands and the Acropolis and cultural things, or there's still interest for other stuff as well? Do they have something specific in mind when they look out for stories here?
I mean, breaking news are breaking news. They don't need to talk about it. Today I was from morning searching for photos from stringers from the 2 shipwrecks that we had, unfortunately. But otherwise, yes, still tourism. I mean, during the season, it plays. We search for stories, smaller stories involving either like Phoebe said, climate change or whatever.
Wildfires, always,
fires,
every
of
summer.
Course, always, unfortunately, again. And then it could be whatever. I mean, we don't have specialization like Harry said before. We cover everything which can which can interest the public abroad. So we do politics, we do social reportage, we do sports. We have less sports, obviously, recently in Greece than before. The big events, I mean, but still we cover everything. So yeah, we try to make a mixture of a little bit of everything and propose it to the editors. That's the daily coverage.
Harry, do you think that what they're looking out from Greece has changed? How has it changed over the years? It has changed a lot, for sure.
The perception, you mean?
The perception and the stories that our editors are looking from us.
These are two slightly different things.
Yeah,
I mean, broadly speaking, if we're speaking about the economy, I mean, 10 years ago we couldn't do anything right, and now apparently we can't do anything wrong. So, because the story perception has changed, Greece is a good story now, for some reason, regardless of what's happening on the ground. I mean, but that's where editing becomes a problem. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, how many times, I'm not speaking about pictures here, I'm speaking about text. We have seen texts under our name which have been turned in a way that makes us cringe a little. It has happened, okay?
Yes.
But that has to do with the fact that editors are people who are stuck in a certain milieu. That is the Western milieu, okay? So they tend to see things in one certain way, and it's very difficult, we as poor schmucks in the provinces, to make them change their minds. I mean, they prefer sometimes, and it's different from person to person. They trust what they see in rival publications, and they trust what they hear in their cocktail dinner parties. And they say, this publication is this story, try and write a similar one, something like that. So,
and you say, we had it last week, and they say, oh.
Okay, so the one good thing about us is that I have no proof of this, but everybody knows how it happens. I mean, sometimes with a publication, with a Greek publication, the owner might pick up the phone and dictate a story. We don't have that. I never had that in 20 years of my experience. But we do have something that is not quite as bad, but we kind of, sometimes we succumb to sensationalism, I think. Sometimes we think we report things in a light that doesn't actually reflect what's happening on the ground. I remember another case, but it was 100 days before the Olympic Games, if you remember. There was one little insignificant, I don't know, it wasn't even a bomb that exploded beneath a car. I was waking up 5 o'clock in the morning, he said, you have to do this. Okay, guys, this is nothing. It happens every day. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. But then other colleagues of mine, foreign colleagues, not Greek ones, because the Greeks knew, they just ran away with it, and we had for an entire news cycle in one day a totally insignificant story occupying all the media waves in the world. At the end of the day, I was reading a story about how the stock exchange in Manila dropped because of the Athens bomb, which was totally ridiculous. So, I mean, you won't always get it right, but editing can be a problem, and prefabricated views as to what Greece is.
That's true, and it happened a lot during the crisis. I remember that there was a cycle of the same stories, different media were trying to, I mean, the story that the Greeks are returning to the land. I don't think it ever happened, but basically I did it as well at some point. All media organizations had it because it was cool, and everybody had the perception abroad that it was happening, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, we did that story.
Phoebe, what do you think? How has the issues that we're dealing with, how have our topics changed over the years?
Well, I mean, this is true, I think, for any country and for any media. It's like when there's like a story and they're like, oh my God, now this is a story. And then it's like, it snowballs. It's like, but the AP went, oh shit, so we have to go. And then AFP went, and then everyone went, and then like, oh, maybe we need to bring somebody over from London to help out. And then you have to justify the expense of bringing your colleague from London in their hotels, and so you have to you're making more and more stories. And maybe it wasn't such a big deal, but it just snowballs. But I mean, I feel, again, very lucky, just as with Harry, because where I was working, because my local editor was so respected and so, you know, for 25 years, that's who was in charge. We were a bureau that didn't have to check in so often to, you know, we put out, when we decided to put out a story, we put out a story. And, you know, but that was, we're very lucky. That's extremely lucky. Usually, you have to justify every single thing, every single expense, every single taxi ride, or, you know, why do we need a sound person? You know, you have to I feel like now we have to justify the expense of everything more than, you know, 12 years ago. I think that's what's changed. But certainly we have done a lot more tourism stories than, you know, we did a few years ago. But now, because that's the story is like, Greece is booming, the economy is amazing, we're breaking record-breaking tourist numbers.
And the refugee crisis, I mean, this is...
Yeah, and the refugee crisis, that was the biggest thing, but yeah.
We have more stories recently, so that's good for our job, I would say. I don't know if it matches the country's interests, but yeah. What about journalists coming from abroad? We mentioned that briefly before. Foreign correspondents that join us when there is a big story on the ground. How are they treated differently? Is it important for them to be here? Is it difficult for our work? What do you think? Who wants to start? Really?
I mean, when it depends what kind. If it's from our, you know, office, then of course we're very happy, because that means, you know, we can have shifts and you can cover that entrance and that entrance, because, you know, with the camera to get whoever you need to grab. But I mean, usually it's good that they're there, because you know, they're able to see things, you're able to meet. It's like a networking event in a way, like when we were, you know, 100 journalists waiting outside for Varoufakis to go in and out. It was a bit like a party, and you know, and everyone was on their best behavior. They were making, you know, a little space. I mean, okay, sometimes you fight.
It lasted many hours, this party.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, you got a little, you know, pissed off with, you know, the guy next to you. Sometimes, you know, cables are pulled. These things happen.
Harry?
I don't think it makes a difference, and I don't think it should make a difference, to tell the truth. I mean, I wouldn't even say that it makes our life more difficult, because sometimes when you're walking into a room and you're from outside, you can get the smell, whereas where we are in the room, we don't get the smell because we've been here too long. So sometimes it's good that new people come in and take fresh angles. Now, as I said, I don't think it should make a difference. It hasn't done in my case, because I work alone anyway. So.
Any questions? Yep, please go ahead.
I'm a journalist from magazine. I would like to ask you about the restrictions of access to the reporting fields, especially regarding the refugee issues, because this has been a really great problem from Greek journalists also. But I guess you, as correspondents, have greater opportunity to get access finally, and your reporting is also more influencing. So what about restrictions of access to the reporting field?
Luisa, because you have been covering migration a lot.
In recent years, there are great restrictions for us too. I mean, we usually get access when there is a politician or the Pope or somebody visiting. We recently did 2 stories. We were granted access, but it was very limited, working with somebody responsible of the camp, or once we even got access and then we were kicked out after 10 minutes, not because we did something wrong, completely not, but it was some misunderstanding between the responsible of the camps. So no, we don't have really better access. Yeah. I wouldn't say so. At least not.
Yeah, no.
Not for me.
We don't have. We always ask for it, or if we'll ask for an interview, and they will stonewall us, and then they will do that thing where they invite all the foreign media one day and all the Greek media the other day, and then they say, look, see how nice this bathroom is, look how nice this container is, bye-bye now. There's no...
Would you describe this as a high level of censorship for media?
I mean, I wouldn't call it exactly censorship, because in a way that we were spoiled in a way before, because it was full access. You didn't have to be a journalist. Like, people were just coming and camping here and there, and you could go. Nobody was stopping you. But that was also not exactly I mean, now they say it's safer this way, it's cleaner this way, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's a gray area. I would say it's a gray area. What do you think?
As well, we were offered a few times that, for example, the authorities will send us the material from whatever, which of course we won't agree, because it's just one-sided, and we want you to have the access. I can understand when it's some operation which must be done, that maybe, limited access of media for sure will help that, but we need to have some access at least. So, yeah, you can translate it how you want, of course, but...
I mean, the Foreign Press Association has been called many times to help for foreign correspondents, either that are based in Athens or are coming from abroad, especially for this issue for migration, and there is no access, basically. Access is only granted when you go there with the minister. So there is a big issue on this, in this field, basically, of reporting. Yeah.
Hi, so I'm a Greek journalist as well. My name is Sofia Mandilara, and my question is, first, have you ever been censored? And second, has the government tried to stop a story that you were trying to report, or have you been attacked after reporting a story? You obviously have, but have you been censored? Has the government tried to stop a story from being published?
Yes. I mean, from our editors, no, but from the government, yes, and it happens not only in Greece. I don't want to... I mean, every government will try to twist the story and present it in a way that works for it better in every country. The thing is that basically lately it has got a bit out of hand, and I think it's because of the fact that there is not a lot of diversity in the Greek media. You know that foreign correspondents kind of do a job that is not very, you don't see this kind of reporting in local media, so that's the thing that stands out, and this person becomes an easy target. Anyone? Another question?
No, I have not been censored, no.
Yep.
Thank you. I would like to ask you, have you received any kind of education, some kind of training so as to become correspondents? Thank you.
Well, we have hostile environment training from our agencies. I mean,
Or you talk mainly, I mean, most of people studied journalism, I studied photography, so this is the primary thing. Then the languages, I guess, for everybody, you can tell more. I'm still...
I mean, I don't know of anyone who was hired before having a journalistic experience, so that's taken for granted. What they do is that, I mean, what happened in my case frequently, is that they call you to headquarters and they show you the systems. They show you this is a snap. This is the 2 paragraphs that we send after that. And this is the. Bloomberg has a very systematized approach. They already have a book, and before working for Bloomberg, you are examined about the book, if I'm not correctly. So this is a. So there is a system. There is a system there. I mean, I've never worked for a Greek newspaper, and I don't know how it is, but okay. The question of education is a very long one. I mean, I know that in Germany, for instance, where the media landscape is totally different, before people start working in the big national media, they usually have started working in the provincial one, which has an established market position because it's the only one. And then when you do good stories from that, then you kind of then you draw attention to yourself to work for a Greek national medium. Whereas in Greece, it's really not like that.
Oh yeah, in the States as well. You do local TV, and then if you're really good at local TV, the national. But yeah, everybody has some kind of journalism experience. But I would say for me it was just, I moved here in 2011 because I wanted to experience.
And the only education you need is news judgment. And news judgment comes with experience, and you will all, as I said, if A says something outrageous, I mean, you can't do a story with an outrageous statement out of Greece every day, because people are like that, they talk like that. The question is, does it matter? Is it important? And that's the difficult thing to do and to evaluate. And even if you do it right, your colleague will do it wrong, and he'll draw you into writing a story that you don't like, but you have to.
Yeah.
Because now you're expected to feed into a relentless news cycle constantly, rather than have the luxury of deep diving into a story, analyzing it in depth. I remember that was my case. When I first came as a correspondent for the BBC, I had the absolute luxury of doing half-hour stories on any subject I chose to, and as a barometer of the socio-economic situation in the country. And that has changed with just sort of constantly feeding also what your editors sitting in Paris or London expect you to feed them.
My words, exactly. That's what I've been living with. When I started at work, we had a weekly newspaper, and you were only working towards the newspaper. Right now we have a website, and we're feeding the beast every day. And that robs you of the time to do other stuff that are potentially more valuable to your reader. And that's the logic. More media outlets, more competition, more sensationalism, even less time.
And I would say it depends on the media organization. I mean, I was working with the Wall Street Journal before, and they would be interested in basically one story, 2 stories per month, and they would give you all the resources to do these 2 stories. And but there are not many media organizations that have the luxury to do that. And for example, the Wall Street Journal is not in many countries in Europe anymore. So that's the problem. Everywhere, not only in Greece. The same is in foreign media. The problem is funding, basically. And that's why I think collaborative journalism is growing. And it could be the future for big projects.
And foreign media networks have thinned out. You have, where you had 3 people covering one country, now you have one guy covering 3 countries. So.
Hi. And the technology, and as fast, I mean, now we're sending photo in the same moment we take it, which of course I hate it, but I have to do it.
And I think, sorry, one last remark, I think COVID was a big problem with this, because we all got used to getting interviews via Skype or via Zoom, so basically the role of our correspondent is non-existent if this trend continues.
Yeah, because they just send us all these things through Dropbox, and then you just write them up, and then you go and cook a meal, and you don't see anybody. That's why this is so exciting.
No press conferences, yay! Yeah.
One question, do you feel you have some kind of responsibility for the image of the country when your stories go out? And I'm not talking about the government, I'm talking about people in society, because as Harry said, right now, if tourists come to Greece after they read the articles, they believe that everybody is rich, happily running in the fields, as we say. If somebody came back in 2012, when we had the Syntagma Square and the Aganaktizmeni, they would think that they would come to Athens, it would be a battlefield all over the city. So do you think you have some kind of, this is the only word that I can think of, responsibility towards the society that you're writing about, not the government? Thank you.
Yes, I feel that always, very deeply, that we always have to remember that this is going out, and this is what people are going to think about us. So we really have to be so super careful. And and we always try to have like both sides. Like when we were doing vox pops on the streets, we never wanted to have always like 3 people saying exactly the same thing. We want to reflect all the different kinds of opinions because we don't want to be one-sided. We want to be like, look, this is a snapshot, and you judge.
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, you need to do your job right. You need to get it right because you need to get it right, not because towards some obligation to some other person. Now, of course, when you write a story, you know in advance what will come. But no, this is an argument that we're getting, not just from government people, this government, previous governments, etc. It's also from the society, because many people here regard journalism as a currency for promotion. Journalism is exposure, so journalism is promotion. And exactly because people here haven't learned how to cope with criticism or find it very difficult to cope with criticisms or be tolerant with criticism. That's why they think if you write something that presents them in a bad light, I said that before, they think they're cheated when it comes from us, or they feel especially unfairly treated and they think they have to correct it. So I know people in this country, not just in this country, have that feeling that we have a responsibility towards the image of the country. Let's protect the country, whatever. It's not a proposition we can agree with. I mean, apart from the usual...
No, I don't mean to protect the country. No, that's not what I meant.
You don't say that. But
no, I just want to be clear about that.
We have heard that argument from the Olympic Games down.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's true. And when you have a Greek surname, that's always problematic because you're expected to work for the country, to protect the image of the country. And that's not the role of the journalist, of course. Yeah. I mean, you have a responsibility. I mean, I think if you're Greek and you're working in Greece and present Greece abroad, you feel you have the responsibility to be fair and to present what's happening on the ground fairly and not in a way that works for a government or for an organization or whatever.
Or for an editor if they wanted, like the starving children. Like
we
have, it doesn't make a difference if we're like in this country or what, if the responsibility to the truth and to not be like, oh, because now it's sexy to bash, I don't know, somebody to ride a wave and just that yellow journalism. Like we always have to be super respectful of the truth and to not exaggerate, because if we start the exaggeration, if we tweak it to make it a little sexier, then the people that are going to take our story and read it abroad, they're just going to run with it and exaggerate even more. That's why I feel we have a responsibility, because we're the first draft.
Yeah, and image-wise, if I have an accurate and right caption, I am fine with that. And then, of course, image can be used by anybody in completely different way. But my thing that I have to do right is my caption, which goes with the image. When I'm fine with that, I don't mind what is after that.
We have basically 1 minute. If there's any other question, one last question. Oh.
My last question was that in a world which is divided, you've got extreme groups of vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, Brexiters and Remainers and whatever else. How objective can a journalist be in this sort of deeply divided world? What level of objectivity can you really have?
I mean, you can have objectivity. The thing is, if our work has an impact, that's the sad thing is that you see great stories, great investigations coming out and nobody takes them seriously, and the world turns to Twitter to get informed, basically, and gets all the arguments from there. So I think you can still be objective. The big issue is to get the audience trust back. That's my remark, basically. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. I hope it was interesting, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.